Hello everyone, I'm Sam Copeland. I'm a chess master and a lover of chess history and chess players. This is my tier list of the greatest chess players in history. If you want to fill out your own tier list using this template, then simply check out the link in the description below. First, we should explain the tiers and how we're using them. The top tier is God of Chess. This is for players who are definitely the best player in the world, and they were on an entirely different level relative to everyone else. Whether they were in good form or bad form, you could usually count on them winning most matches and tournaments. Next, we have undisputed number one. I think most people would agree that these players were the best player in the world at some point, but they had competition. If they weren't in their very best form, then they could be defeated in matches and tournaments. Next, we have legends. This is for players who made an incredibly deep impression in chess history, somewhat independent of their achievements. It might be because of their longevity, their personality, or the brilliance of their games. Next, we have great plus lucky. These are players who were right there with their peers at the very top of the chess world, and they got the right breaks. Things fell in line for them, and they had achievements to match their skill. Next, we have great plus unlucky. I think these players were probably just as good as the players above them, but they didn't get the right breaks, and thus their achievements might be a little less than the players in the tiers above. Finally, we have theorist, for players who might not competitively be up there with the rest of these players, but who did make a deep impression through their thinking and writing about the game. The first player on our list is Akiba Rubinstein. I think he definitely goes in great plus unlucky. A tremendous player around 1910-1911, he might have been the best player in the world. At least he had the tournament achievements to make that claim. Unfortunately, for various reasons, some of them nefarious, he never got a world championship match with Lasker. Next, we have Alexander Alekhine, a player who did become world champion, and in the 1930s, I think he was the best player in the world, undisputed number one. Viswanathan Anand is a player who has got a tremendous career. I think he's a legend. Now, you could make the argument for undisputed number one. He's been world champion. He's been the number one ranked player. But I'm not sure there's ever been a clear margin between him and Kramnik, him and Carlsen, him and Kasparov, so I think legends is the right category. He's at the top of this category based on various achievements, including his longevity, his many brilliant games, and also his impact on chess in India. Adolf Anderssen won the Immortal game, won the Evergreen game. Legend. David Bronstein is a player who I think is similar to Akiba Rubinstein. Great and unlucky. He almost became world champion. He had a world championship match with Botvinnik. He led most of the way. He eventually drew the match, but there were no tiebreaks. Botvinnik just got to retain the title. Also, for much of his career, he was on the outs with the Soviet Union and was denied competitive opportunities that he richly deserved. Capablanca is a player who I think you could definitely put in the undisputed number one category, maybe near the very, very top, but I'm going to put him in God of Chess. At his peak, in and around World War I, unfortunately, I think that he was absolutely the best player in the world, a player with a deserved reputation for being basically unbeatable. Next, we have Magnus Carlsen. I'm also going to put Magnus Carlsen in God of Chess. Maybe you could argue it's a little bit premature. Who knows what the 2020s hold for Magnus? But for basically all of this decade, he's been the best player in the world and by a big margin. Now, there are other great players, great number twos like Fabiano Caruana, Hikaru Nakamura, Wesley So, various other players at different points, but the margin between him and them has always been significant. Next, we have Max Euwe, a player who I think definitely goes in great and lucky. Now, I don't want to diminish Euwe's achievements. He's a tremendous player. But things went right for him to get that world championship match with Alexander Alekhine. It could have been other players who got that match. It could have been other players who became world champion. He's a tremendous player who deserves great respect and may have been right there with Alekhine in the period, but I'm not sure you can definitely say he was undisputed number one, but the breaks happened for him to get to be world champion. Fabiano Caruana, I think, goes in great and unlucky. I think that's basically because you don't want your career to overlap with Magnus Carlsen. If Carlsen wasn't around, Fabiano Caruana could be the number one player in the world and by, a significant margin for some of these years. Next, we have Reuben Fine, another player who I think goes in great and unlucky. A tremendous player in and around the 30s and around World War II, unfortunately he never got quite as many opportunities as I think he deserved. Next, Bobby Fischer. Easily god of chess, right there at the top. The margin between him and his peers is insane. In the modern era, to beat Mark Taimanov 6-0, to beat Bent Larsen 6-0 is absolutely astonishing. We can't even conceive of a player doing that today, and the 1970s were not so long ago. These were deserved grandmasters. Harry Pillsbury. In the late 1800s, he might have been the best player in the world. He was right there with Emanuel Lasker, and their battles were incredible. Unfortunately, like many of the best American players, his story has a tragic element. He suffered an illness and died at a very young age. Next, Hikaru Nakamura, legend. Number 2 in the classical lists. He's also dominated in blitz and bullet and rapid. In online chess, he's made a huge name for himself, and now he's dominating Twitch and YouTube. Ivanchuk is also a legend for totally different reasons. I can't imagine Ivanchuk making a Twitch or a YouTube channel, although who knows these days. However, at his very, very best in his long career, he's made players like Kasparov and Carlsen look, to be honest, like patsers. He's even been recognized by Kasparov for that incredible skill. Next, Judith Polgar. Easily a legend. The best female chess player of all time, and it's not even close. She's been in the top 10 in the world. At the age of 12, she entered the world's top 100, and she basically only left it when she retired. She also bested Bobby Fischer, becoming the youngest grandmaster and defeating Fischer's 34-year record as being the youngest grandmaster. Next, we have Anatoly Karpov, a clear number 1. I think in the late 70s and early 80s, Karpov was the best player in the world, and he's also made a huge impression due to his unique and incredibly smooth positional style. Kasparov, one of the great attacking players. I think he goes in God of Chess. Now, many would argue that Kasparov is the greatest chess player of all time. I think there's very good reason to make that claim, but the way that I've built these tiers, I think he goes below Fischer. That's due to being a little less dominant compared to his peers relative to Fischer. The margin that Fischer had over Taimanov, Larsen, Spassky, anyone else on the planet was just much more significant than the margin that Kasparov had. Paul Carey, great and unlucky. A player with a huge career that spanned decades. Unfortunately, he never got a world championship match. At least part of the reason for that had to be politics and the relationship between the Soviet Union and Estonia. Mir Sultan Khan, a player who learned chess in India, then learned chess internationally, a different form of chess, traveled to Europe, and even beat Capablanca. If the circumstances of his life had been different, if he had different opportunities, it's hard not to think that his impression in chess could have been truly tremendous. Or possibly he would never have played chess, and he could have pursued a different discipline and made an impression there. Viktor Korchnoi, the longest competitive career of any chess player, multiple world championship matches, spectacularly departing the Soviet Union. Also, the most combative chess player on the board or off the board that has ever existed. Emanuel Lasker, the longest reigning world champion and an undisputed number 1. Mikhail Botvinnik, a lengthy career as world champion, but I think great plus lucky. I'm not sure that his career ever showed that he was clearly superior to Smyslov, Bronstein, and other great players, but he had the right breaks, support from the Soviet Union, and the opportunity for rematches, which he was very good at. Paul Morphy, absolute god of chess. The margin between him and everyone else in the chess world while he was playing was just huge. Rashid Nejmetdinov, legend. His games are tremendously special. If you've seen his games on my channel, or more likely on a Godmatur's channel, then I don't think you're going to dispute this. Aaron Nimzovich, theorist. He made a huge impression through his chess writing, but he was not one of the absolute best players in the world at his peak. Strong, but not a world championship contender. Philidor, Another player who I think goes in the theorist category, maybe undisputed number one, but I'm not sure that we have enough knowledge about the period in the 1700s when he played chess to say that. But his writings about chess and also his ideas about chess have made a huge impression. Pawns are the soul of chess. Vasily Smyslov, I think great and maybe a little bit lucky. A huge player, a tremendous player in the 1950s, he got the right breaks and ultimately did take the title away from Botvinnik for a period. Boris Spassky, I think you could argue both lucky and unlucky. I'm going to put him in great plus lucky. The breaks did line up for him and he did become world champion, but I could see arguing that he was unlucky because his tremendous career unfortunately overlapped Fischer. And also, after he lost the world championship match to Fischer, under the circumstances, it seemed like he never really had the same fire and competitive spirit afterwards. Wilhelm Steinitz, I think undisputed number one. People often speak maybe a little bit ill of Steinitz as a player who was not on the level of Morphy and was clearly far below Lasker, but for a period of decades, he was probably the best player in the world, even if that period was a bit of a low point after Morphy. Mikhail Tal, absolutely a chess legend. His games are beloved. His style is one of the most favored styles in all of chess. You just need to look at Chess YouTube to understand this. He also became world champion at a very young age. It looked like he might dominate for decades. Unfortunately for Tal, health was always an issue. Siegbert Tarrasch, theorist. A player who I'm not sure was ever even clearly number two in the world, but his writings, especially his competitive writings with Nimzovich, made a tremendous impression on classical chess and our understanding of chess in the modern era. Tigran Petrosian, I think great and lucky. I just don't know that he was clearly superior to his peers, but things lined up for him to become world champion in the 60s. Of course, he also has a very distinct style that has made a great impression on positional players. Veselin Topalov, a player who I think also goes in the great and lucky category. In the 2000s, he had a huge tenure as the number one player in the world and as disputed world champion. He also won many spectacular games. However, I do think that things lined up for him to get that slot, and it's not clear that he was superior to his peers. Vladimir Kramnik. You could put him in great and lucky, maybe great and unlucky. I'm really not sure. But I'm going to slide him in here in great and unlucky. The reason I'm going to do that is I think that it's totally unfair that after defeating Kasparov, Kramnik had to contend with a disputed world championship cycle. If that hadn't happened, I think he would have been an absolutely legendary world champion and dominant for a significant part of the 2000s. So, I hope that you enjoyed this list. If you like it and want to make your own, check out the link in the description below. If you want to see videos with some of the amazing games that these players played, then do subscribe to the channel.